I've been wanting to do a Sonic episode of Franchise and Lows for a long time, but the original remit of Franchise and Lows back in the day was to do every single game in the sort of 16 8-bit era, and that would have been my end of my life. I would have been like a skeleton with a huge beard inexplicably. But I decided to focus on just the Sonic games released for Nintendo handhelds, which I think still gives us a broad selection of games to play, but also isn't so absurd it's going to destroy my life like doing all of the 8 and 16-bit games would have been. I still might go back and do the 8-bit Sonic games in the future, but for now, hopefully this will be enjoyable. Anyway, let's get started. Sonic Advance was released for the Game Boy Advance, funnily enough, in 2001, and it's very much in the vein of the old Mega Drive games. In fact, of the many games I'm going to talk about now, it's the absolute closest in feel to one of those games that they've mustered, since, frankly, because Sonic 4, of course, didn't really capture that feel at all. Oddly enough, feeling a lot like a Sonic Advance game, one of the later ones, but somewhat inferior. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself now. Sonic Advance is a game that I feel at the time didn't get its dues, and I kind of put that down to the... I was about to say I put that down to the general sort of distaste for Sonic that's in the sort of gaming community at large, outside of its fans, obviously. But I'm not sure if that even existed back then. I don't know how long this whole like Sonic is bad and has always been bad meme has been going for. But anyway, Advance 1, it's a good game. I think it was reviewed reasonably well, and what it is you've got your sort of fairly typical 6 or 7 zones, go from left to right, beat up Robotnik at the end of every second stage, go to special stages, get the 7 Chaos Emeralds. It's very traditional, and it feels almost pointedly traditional, because, of course, this was the first new 2D Sonic game in quite a long time to appear on a handheld, if we don't count Sonic Pocket Adventure on the Neo Geo Pocket Color, which I think came out in 99 or 98, I'm not sure, I'm afraid. But while that had new level layouts, it was largely based on the Mega Drive game Sonic the Hedgehog 2. Whereas this one is all new, almost entirely new. There's a couple of throwback bosses towards the end, but they're just for nostalgia, like in the Sky Sanctuary Zone in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, for example, when you fight the boss with the pendulum from Sonic 1. That's replayed here again. It's like a greatest hits almost. But no, it's a good one. I think the theming is quite strong, although there's very little in the way of connection between the zones. Which obviously isn't the case in a lot of the games either, but something like Sonic and Knuckles did make an effort to show a transition between the stages. I mean, Sonic Advance 2 doesn't make a pointed one, but you could be implied, because that game is all about forward motion, that you were running from place to place. It's an entirely reasonable conclusion to draw. Sonic Advance 3 sort of has you warping around through a sort of broken world, so that almost justifies the detached stages that you go to, but this one is just like, no, you finished that one and now you're on the ice level or whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter, so it's not really a complaint. Anyway, you've got 4 playable characters, Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and Amy Rose. Now, Amy's the most interesting one. They all have their different things, but they're much the same as in the previous games, like Tails is flying and Knuckles gliding and punching, but Amy is different because she can't sort of spin jump, so when she's jumping she's still vulnerable. She's carrying her hammer, so she controls very differently, and she's very interesting and fun to play as. She's got quite a lot of different moves you have to master to get through the stages. In order to get 100% you have to collect, as I mentioned earlier, all 7 Chaos Emeralds, which are hidden around the stages in, well, special stages. I believe there's one special stage spring hidden in one act of each zone, which makes them pretty elusive because they're big stages, and you don't know whether it's going to be in the first or the second one. I'm not sure if they're all in Act 2 or all in Act 1, or if there's something like that. I think most of them are in Act 2, but I might be talking out of my arsehole. Anyway, it's good. It's a very good game, and it set a good precedence, I think, for Sonic on Nintendo, because it's more or less along the lines of, well, nothing's different right now, really. And it would have been cool if they could have kept this up for maybe one more game, but they almost immediately veered off in a different direction, not to its detriment, but it is a shame in some ways, because I could have done with one more Mega Drive-style Sonic game. Sonic Advance 2 is released for the GBA the next year in 2002, and it's almost immediately a change of tack because, as we discussed, the previous game is very much like the Mega Drive ones, and this one is pretty far from them. In fact, it's a fairly decent example of the commonly held criticism against the Sonic series, which was its hold right to win. Of course, I could get into a whole other tangent about by what measure of winning is getting to the exit in one of these games, because they're designed to be played and replayed, and seconds shaved off your time, and secret bonus rings found, and etc, etc. But that doesn't stop the internet. So no. Of course, a lot of the stages in this game you can complete by holding right. Maybe occasionally you'll have to press left to go down a hill or something, but that's true. You can get to the end of the level by holding right, but that's not winning. That's just completing the level, which is not the end game here. The end game, as I've implied, is to get all of the special rings and visit the special stages to get 7 emeralds, because it's a Sonic game. And then, now in this game, getting the special rings is incredibly difficult because they're incredibly well hidden and very, very hard to find. Especially the fact you have to get all 7 of them in one run, which is very difficult. Especially since the level design, based around just motion and constant forward movement, is pretty much designed around keeping you moving, so going back isn't always an option. So if you do miss one, it can sometimes be very finicky to get back to in order to pick it up. Indeed, this game's so obsessed with running and moving and going fast that all the boss battles are fought with you chasing the boss as it runs away from you, which I can see why some people wouldn't like, but I found pretty cool. The only issue is, for me, some of the bosses are a little bit cheap and unfun. Like there's one around halfway through the game that has this big hand slap attack that can kill you in one hit even if you've got rings, which is, well, it's kind of bullshit, and it doesn't really make sense given the rules that the Sonic series governs itself by, which is you can die in one hit if you drown, you can die in one hit if you get squashed. That's about it. Anything other than that, you've got rings, you don't die. And I don't accept getting slapped by a big hand is more injurious than falling like 60 feet onto spikes. I think that would be worse. But anyway, despite all the negative stuff I've just said, this might be my favourite one of the Sonic Advance games, simply because its focus is so fresh, coming off Sonic Advance 1, which I do like, but this is something completely different. This is Sonic in 2D going fast, like we've never seen before. Of course, they will try and top this later, but they do so in a way that I feel undermines some of what this game achieved, because while you go insanely fast, it's still about momentum, and you can't go you can't go fast without sort of earning it, except, having said that, there's a lot of those speed booster things on the floor which just send you flying. But if you do manage to build your speed up, you can break sort of a sound barrier, and it's a very cool effect, and it's a nice reward for managing to keep an unbroken run going. Anyway, yeah, Sonic Advance 2, good game, has a little bit of dodgy level design towards the end. Once you reach the stage called Sky Canyon, there's a bit of kind of bullshit there, which is not desirable, but overall it's still the one I've gone back to the most, trying to collect all the coins with all the characters and try and shave seconds off my time. Sonic Pinball Party was released for the Game Boy Advance in 2003 to bridge the Sonic Advance 2 and 3 titles, although there was one other game in between, which I'll get to next, obviously. It's a pretty solid pinball game. I think there's only a couple of tables, though, and one of them's based on Knights, so, I mean, why would you play that? Sorry, Knights fans. But it's pretty good stuff. I'm not going to say much about it, because pinball's pinball, and I love it, but, you know, there was a lot of pinball on the Game Boy Advance. We had Pinball of the Dead, we had Pokemon, Pinball Ruby and Sapphire, we had Pac-Man Pinball, Super Mario Ball, which is admittedly a bit different, and I'm sure there were others that I'm forgetting right now. But it was pretty cool. I mean, it had a mission-based sort of story mode, which was quite fun, because in a way that's a pretty cool way of teaching you how to play pinball and how to understand the table and the rules that it's governed by. But what it ultimately meant is it was just really, really, really freaking hard, because in particular I remember the final mission, you had to beat Robotnik at pinball, and how that was represented was his score would just go up by 200,000 points or so every second. So you had to just constantly score high, constantly score big, and in a game with as much pinball, with as much luck and physics manipulation required as pinball, that's not a great idea, basically, because you had a 5-minute time limit, and Robotnik's scoring that whole time, and if you're not scoring for, say, a minute, which is entirely feasible in pinball, you lose. That's all there is to it. You're just not going to win. So that was kind of unfair. But as a pinball sim, you could do a lot worse. It's pretty good stuff. It looks nice, it sounds nice, and there's a lot of nice Sega-y fan service stuff in it, like tracks from Burning Rangers and Choo Choo Rocket and stuff like that. So, you know, look into it if you like pinball and you like not finishing the game. Sonic Battle, also released in 2003, is a bit of a departure for the series, and it's very much a spin-off in which you control many of the beloved Sonic characters and take them into a sort of, I'm going to say, Power Stone-esque free-roaming kind of brawler, although to call it Power Stone-esque kind of implies that there are any items to use, which there aren't. It's just you and your specials and your moves. Now, I played through this from beginning to end, I'm going to say 3 times, because I played the Japanese version when it came out, then I played it again when the Western version came out, then when I picked up a copy later again, I beat it again then. And I don't know why, because it's really, really poor. I really, really didn't like it, but it has a weirdly compelling story for a Sonic game, and expansive, and it's long, and it doesn't seem quite so intelligence-insulting. It's about Sonic and Tails discovering this robot called, I think his name is Emil, or Emerl, or something, and basically what you do, when you play as him, he's like a learning robot, so he learns the moves from the people that he beats up. So basically you have to keep fighting to gain experience points and level up your little Emil robot with the move choice of your, with a move set of your choice, which is kind of an appealing thing, and it keeps you playing, because it's like, yeah, I'll just play a little bit more, and maybe I'll be able to get another pretty sweet move off of Knuckles or something. But, I mean, it's a frustrating game full of flaws, like, the whole perspective is flawed. You can be standing in front of an enemy and attacking and not hitting them because they're just slightly above or below you. It's not generous enough. In a pinch, it's hard to pull off, like, the power moves or the upward moves. It's just a flawed game, but for some reason it kind of got its hooks in me. It's probably worth a look if you can find it for cheap, because it is pretty fascinating. It's got a quite cool visual style going on, and like I said, the story is interesting, and if I remember correctly, it ends on a surprising sort of down note, which is kind of fascinating, and does lead into Sonic Advance 3 to some incredibly mild degree. And also in the Japanese version, Rouge says bastard, which is hilarious, because, you know, swearing. Sonic Advance 3, released for the Game Boy Advance in 2004, is kind of an attempted amalgamation of the first 2 games that isn't entirely successful. They've gone for the more sprawling, platformer-ish sort of gameplay of the original game, but integrated the unbelievably fast speeds you could reach from the second one. And for some reason, it just doesn't seem to fit together that well. The stages can feel really aimless and under-designed in places, like stuff's just happening around you, and there's no real pattern or sort of order to any of it. On the most basic level, the jumping feels weird. The way that you don't feel like you're really connected to the scenery. It feels quite floaty. Your characters don't seem to have weight, which is really unusual. Now, there's a partner character system, which I can only assume is inspired by the recently released 3D abortion Sonic Heroes, but this is a much better game. It's still enjoyable. I'd say it was still good. I think it's pretty high up in the GBA's platformer library, but it's just missing something that the first two had. The fact that each zone has 3 stages, you'd think would be kind of cool because it's more bang for your buck, but there's kind of a reason why they dropped the third act after Sonic 1, because it gets boring. It gets boring looking at the same scenery for 3 stages, especially when the levels are as long as they are in this one. So, to get the special stages in this game, you have to find Chow hidden on each stage, so it's a little bit like the Sonic Advance 2 thing, except there's maybe 3 on each level, and once you've found them, they stay found, so you can just kind of explore. Which I kind of like, but unfortunately there's not a whole lot to find, because the levels look so samey no matter where you go. There are no sort of real landmarks or anything like that. But, it's good stuff, and it's just a little bit lacking compared to the first two. It feels a little bit janky. It feels like a B-team made it, or that it wasn't quite finished, needed a bit more time in the oven, so to speak. That's that's just how I feel about it, though. I mean, I know a lot of people think it's the best one, and that's fair enough, but I just can't see it that way. Sonic Rush followed Sonic Advance 3, but was released on the Nintendo DS in 2005, and it's another departure. Overall, it's closest in spirit to the Advance 2 style, where you're constantly moving, but unlike that game, you don't really need momentum, because you have a boost bar, which lets you just burst into speed no matter when, really, but just by pressing the Y button if you have enough boost energy, and it kind of works, and the 3D games adopted it pretty much wholesale, but it's a shame, because it did mean the end fully of any momentum-based sort of design in the series for now. I like Sonic Rush. I think it's extremely enjoyable when you get a good flow going. It's a really fun game, where if you're losing boost all the time and you're not good at the game yet, it's a bit of a bummer, though, and the stages stretching across 2 screens can sometimes be a bit confusing, but it's difficult to think of a DS platformer that wasn't true of, really. The special stages were these stylus-based sort of versions of the Sonic 2 special stages, and they were challenging, but they weren't unfair or impossible, so I was rather fond of them. You could beat them all with just a little bit of application, really. It's a good game. It's not as good as Advance 1 or 2, I would say. It does get a bit of a bad sort of rap for having areas where when you boost you just die, and having bottomless pits, but I mean, a lot of Sonic games have had bottomless pits, and quite frankly, having played this game quite a bit, the areas that seem like gotchas aren't really gotchas. They're only that way if you want to play it by constantly moving and never having to sort of be aware of your surroundings, which is not what you should be doing on the first playthrough, obviously, but all the same, there are areas where it drops you down and you land on a platform, and if you boost, you will then die, but then why would you do that when you're standing on a quite small platform anyway? It's just unusual to me. Yeah, good game, refined in its sequels, although in some ways the next one was a bit of a step back. Sonic Rush Adventure was released in 2007, and it's a mixed bag. It's very fun. The stages design is very fun. It's almost exactly the same as Rush, with a couple of control tweaks, but in between stages, you're going to be spending a lot of time driving vehicles around with the stylus, and, it's like, It's like Sonic Unleashed. It's like, I don't want to be doing this in a Sonic game. I want to be running around. And no, they make you drive a boat and a jet ski, so, you know, for Christ's sake. It's got a lot of content. There are a lot of zones, and then there are a lot of sort of extra hidden zones if you were to explore the map, which is quite cool. So I can't completely hate the sort of whole sailing around in a boat aspect, because it just leads you to have a lot more levels. But overall, as good as it is, and I would recommend it to anyone who owns a DS, don't get me wrong, it's just that little bit unfocused, a little bit messy, like they felt as though the core gameplay that people liked wasn't enough. So they had to innovate, and the innovation leads to just basically some sections that really do rather outstay their welcome. Again, it's very good, I would pick it up, but they refined it even further with the third game in this series, which is confusingly named Sonic Colors, which I will talk about shortly. Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood for the Nintendo DS was released in 2008, and it's very odd. It's a sort of an isometric RPG made by BioWare, the guys who made what did they make? I think Jade Empire and Knights of the Old Republic and Mass Effect, obviously, and Dragon Age, of course, that's what they made. They might have made Neverwinter Nights, I'm not sure, but it's just bizarre. Like, for one thing, it's a BioWare RPG about Sonic. Like, what the hell happened? Like, how did that happen? I'm not really complaining, but I guess I am, because the game sucks. It's not entirely unenjoyable. It's quite fun just running around the environments and figuring out how to collect all the rings, but that's it, because the combat is just ceaseless and tedious, and it's too difficult, and it's janky. Like, the whole game just never feels like it's holding together. It's basically just a collapsing game as you play it. It's difficult to describe unless you've actually played it yourself, but it just doesn't function correctly. It's like full of weird hitches and jank, and the sound, the music is appalling. And I can only imagine that it's because there was some licensing issue or something, because I can't imagine why else the music would be that bad. I mean, I don't know this for a fact, I'm purely speculating, but it's the kind of soundtrack that comes about when all the music in the game is replaced at the last minute, so that's my guess as to what happened. But, okay, like, what's good about it? In terms of its plot and its dialogue, it's not bad. It's better than most Sonic games, obviously, but if you really like Sonic stories, then, you know, I don't know, consider adapting your preferences, because, I mean, it's not good enough to make this game worth playing. Go and like, I don't know, watch a long play maybe. I don't know. It's a bad game. I really can't recommend it, and I don't think this is a spoiler. Well, it is a spoiler, but it doesn't really matter. There's no sequel, so that you don't get a payoff from this one. The ending is basically just, like, wait for the sequel, and it never happened, because, well, it just never happened, did it? Sonic Colors, released on the DS in 2010, is obviously the handheld version of the Wii Sonic game, also named Sonic Colors, funnily enough, that's held in quite high regard by Sonic fans, although I have to say I find it a little bit frustrating, which this handheld version isn't at all. It's extremely good. I would say it's quite comfortably the best of the DS Sonic games, and that's saying a lot because Rush and Rush Adventure are very, very good, but this one takes what those games brought to the table and really just streamlines it completely. The only thing I would say against it is it's very quite short, and also the slide move they added in doesn't really add anything. It's just sort of like react in time, or be stopped by a low wall that you have to slide under. It's just kind of bad. And there's one area in the game, just one I can recall, where if you don't slide in time you will die, and that kind of guarantees that the first time you play that area you will die, because you're not going to be prepared for that slide, and that's kind of BS. I mean, that's the kind of thing that people say Sonic level design is like, when it's really often not. So it's a shame when they actually do adhere to that mistake, a bit like Sonic Advance 2 and the Sky Canyon level I mentioned already, which is full of stuff like that. But no, it's really good. It doesn't get bogged down with minigames. There are a few sort of into the screen or unusual sort of sections. It's got the best special stages of the DS games as well, and overall it's just really satisfying. There's a lot to do, it's really fun, and it's also kind of cheap, so I recommend picking it up. Sonic Generations, released in 2011 for the 3DS, is kind of underrated in my opinion, though I'm not going to pretend it doesn't have pretty serious flaws. But I mean, that's just like me, really, isn't it? But no. What it is, of course, it's the handheld version of the quite widely acclaimed console and PC game Sonic Generations, which goes back through the history of Sonic games, presenting some of the most popular levels and sort of reimagining them. It keeps the classic and modern Sonic structure of that game, but the difference is the classic Sonic levels are literal sort of one-to-one recreations of the Mega Drive stages, as far as there were Mega Drive stages to recreate. Obviously, once you get past, say, the first 3 or 4 levels, all the stages are new. Though I'm not going to pretend it's not a little bit disappointing to have complete recreations of stages instead of new ones. Of course, all the modern Sonic levels are new, but it takes about 3 zones again for those to become good. The first 2, the Green Hill and Casino Night zones, are really, really bland and straightforward, and once you reach Mushroom Hill, it kind of becomes good. But to me, that's a decent chunk of very, very fun Sonic game. I think it's a really good one, and I'm surprised it gets hated on so much. The special stages are taken straight from Sonic Heroes, which is one of the few things that game did well in concept, although in the actual game Sonic Heroes they barely functioned, obviously, because it's Sonic Heroes. And yeah, it's a good one. I do recommend picking it up. It's got one feature that I really liked that a lot of people probably wouldn't like, which is that when there are 100 missions you can play in the game. They take place in the existing stages by and large, but they are new objectives basically, and to unlock them you have to street pass with someone who has Sonic Generations, who's already unlocked that mission, or something like that. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but basically it means that you will have content for quite a long time, like content for a good while if you're interested in getting all of those, but it will require you to street pass. Now, I got a bit of a head start because I took my 3DS to the Summer of Sonic convention, where obviously everyone had it and everyone was street passing, but over time I was able to get all 100 of those missions and unlock all of the bonus items that are associated with them. Like, you can unlock 3D models, and you can unlock classic Sonic music, although annoyingly you can't use it in the levels like you can in the full console version. But no, it's good stuff, and I do recommend it, and it's probably not that expensive to buy now, so look out for it. Sonic Lost World, released for the 3DS in 2013, is a terrifically poor game. To say something nice about it, it's impressive that they got a 3D platformer onto the 3DS. I mean, to some degree, because most people just wouldn't bother. But unfortunately, it's of such weak quality and so utterly irritating that it's not something that really needs to be praised. Really, it's much like the Wii version in its sheer irritating bullshitness, if that's even a term. But really, it's something that should work fine, which is Sonic in a sort of Mario Galaxy style, almost sort of rotating stage thing, sort of like the cancelled Sonic Extreme was back on the Saturn, if you're a real nerd. But the level design is just so frequently seeming to obstruct your flow that it doesn't really feel like a Sonic game at all, which is, I suppose, a bonus for some people, but I want to play a Sonic game when I play Sonic, I don't really want to play this kind of Mario-ish wannabe game where you have like a 20-minute time limit and it's, not generous. It's ridiculous. It's really poor, and I don't really want to talk about it that much. It's a annoying and awkward game. So yeah, definitely avoid this one. Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal, released in 2014 for the 3DS, is, of course, based on the quite popular children's television series, also named Sonic Boom. Now, it's well known that the GameCube version of Sonic Boom, which I believe is called Rise of Lyric, is pretty infamously one of the worst Sonic games and one of the worst games on that system, period. I haven't actually played that version, but I honestly think that it looks okay, but what do I know? It's me. I like bad games, it's me. Anyway, Shattered Crystal is interesting. It's a sort of attempt to make Sonic a bit more free-roaming, which means you can change your character at any given time in order to manipulate the environment in a sort of Metroidvania style way, except of course it's not really a Metroidvania because it has distinct levels. But what it means is you can use Knuckles to dig, you use Tails to fly, or Sticks to throw your boomerang to activate switches, but it's always so linear and it's so apparent what you do next that it never is in any sort of real way particularly challenging. It's pretty poor, to be honest. It's not as bad as Lost World, I would say, simply because by and large the game functions. What you're doing is pretty consistent. It doesn't just suddenly turn into a game where you have to push a snowball around for 6 hours like Lost World does. But I can't recommend it because while it could be fun and snappy, it has levels that are routinely 12-13 minutes long, which for a Sonic game is your interest runs out before then. It's the games are not that mechanically varied enough to sort of be played for long stretches like that. I love the Sonic games, but I don't play them for hours and hours and hours because, you lose interest in something that basic, I suppose. But yeah, it's not very good. If you had it super cheap, you might get more out of it than I did, but I don't understand what it really could offer anyone that isn't, available better elsewhere. So, I guess out of 10 I'd give it a sort of 5 because it's just so utterly average. It's never really straight bad, but I can't recommend it. The sequel, however, which I'm about to cover, is much, much better. Sonic Boom Fire and Ice, released in 2016 for the 3DS, is obviously the direct sequel to Shattered Crystal, and it is vastly, vastly superior. Now, the interesting thing about it is it doesn't do a huge amount differently in terms of its gameplay, but what it does is it cuts the levels down into much more bite-sized, manageable experiences, which means you can jump in and jump out in the way that I feel Sonic games need to be. It has much the same sort of goals. There are a lot of collectibles to go back and find, but your first run through a level is less likely to take 12 minutes and more likely to take 2 or 3, which is a lot closer to how the old games used to be, and consequently, it manages to capture that pace a little bit better. I would go so far as to call this one good, in fact. It's fun. It's enjoyable to play. It can be a little bit tricksy with the switching between fire and ice sometimes, and the element sort of thing doesn't develop at all. It's literally just you turn to fire when you want to light a fuse or melt some ice, and vice versa if you want to, freeze some water to run across. But it's all good, and it's a nice game, and it's a shame that I mean there probably aren't going to be any more of these, because if they continue to build on this, then we're going to have a pretty solid sort of series of games going on. But yeah, this one's definitely worth picking up if you like Sonic, especially if you like Sonic Boom, which would be kind of weird, but whatever. Anyway, yeah, it's good. So, those are the Sonic games for Nintendo handhelds. All in all, pretty good. Couple of stinkers in there, but that's always the way. It's not like when I tried to do the Ren and Stimpy games for an abandoned episode that I actually recorded all the footage for myself, and then decided instead to kill myself because the games were so fucking shit. Anyway, have no plans for upcoming episodes, but I will get round to them. Want to just quickly address the Video World 13 lateness thing. Without going into too much detail, I got myself into a mood where it's very, very hard to make anything of any concept, which is why I did this episode to get sort of back into the swing of things. It went pretty well, I think, so look forward to new Video World hopefully soon, and thanks again for watching.